Hey guys, welcome to our video series of Ask Us Anything. We're answering questions around technology, the Bible, Christianity, sexuality, culture. Pretty much nothing is off limits. So let's go. Hey, welcome back to another conversation of Ask Us Anything. This time I have our good friend Andy Bannister with us. He is someone that if you're not familiar with him, we've actually had him out within our church within the past 5-6 years, several times as he's traveled through Canada. And in fact, used to live in Canada. As you'll see, he has a similar accent to me, different part of England, and now lives in Scotland. But he's been a part of Canada as he's lived here and been part of Beulah's. We've invited him out. And so other than that, with the introduction that I gave you, Andy, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, make yourself a little bit more familiar for those that are listening and watching these videos, and then we'll dive into our first question.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for that, Stu. And it's kind of great. It's kind of great sort of seeing you. It's great, thinking back to my various visits coming through Beulah, and I think 4 times. I was thinking about this earlier. I think it's 4 times over the years, and always loved kind of hanging out. So Toronto was home for 6 years, but now I live in Scotland in a town called Dundee, and I head up an organisation called Solas, the Solas Centre for Public Christianity. And really what we do there, Stu, is 2 things. Firstly, we take the message of Jesus out of the 4 walls of the churches and into places like university campuses and workplaces and coffee shops and cafes and pubs and you name it, anywhere we can get it. And these days with COVID, a lot of that's happening like online, but we can't wait to get back in person. And so we love just showing people that there are good, persuasive reasons to take Jesus seriously. And then the other half, what we do is we teach and we train and we equip Christians to share their faith at school, at college, at university, at work, with their mates, their friends, and whatever. So I think a lot of Christians are quite afraid about opening their mouths and talking about Jesus. Right. And so we try and help just equip people gently and in accessible ways so it's not quite as scary. And then a lot of that we do digitally as well. So if people want to check us out, you can just look me up on Facebook or social media. Andy G. Bannister is the handle I normally go by. You'll find links there to Solas. And there's videos and articles and blogs and podcasts and all of that stuff, all free. Everything we do is free to use. Cool. So if you find something on the website you like, don't ask our permission. Use it, nick it, share it, and hopefully it'll help you talk about the faith.
Yeah, awesome, good stuff. I want to ask what the G stands for in your name, but I won't embarrass you for that. I'll make a different kind of statements on that. I know you have a new book coming out. Would love for you to be able to tell everyone that's watching this video about that and why they should read it, because I think it's an important question that you are answering.
Yeah. Well, Stu, the new book is called "Do Muslims and Christians Worship the Same God?" and is out already. Oh well, it's out in the UK in every format you can imagine. In North America, it comes out in paperback beginning of May, but in Canada, you can already get it in ebook or an audiobook. If you're into those kind of formats. And the reason I thought the book's important, Stu, is that I think we live in a culture where there's all these other religions jostling for attention. And one way that I think people think about that is to assume they are all essentially the same. And especially when it comes to Islam, the world's second biggest faith, and Christianity, there is a tendency to lump Islam and Christianity and Judaism together under the title Abrahamic faiths, and to assume, well, look, hang on, Christians and Jews and Muslims, they all believe in one God, one creator God, so surely it's the same God, right? And that's the assumption. And so the book really sets out effectively to ask the question, okay, well, what do we mean when we talk about the word God? Let's actually look at the Quran, the scripture of Islam, and see what it says about God. Let's look at the Bible and see what it says about God and his nature and his character. And then let's compare the two portraits, and let's see how closely they stand up. And the more you do that, the deeper you dive into that, actually the bigger the differences get. And what's interesting is all the differences really revolve around issues that are central to the gospel. The question of whether God is a God of love, whether God is a God of forgiveness, whether God has actually done anything in history in terms of reaching out to and rescuing human beings. And in all of that, I say, look, I think the way that we actually, as Christians, we can respect our Muslim friends is actually by not trying to squish things together and assume we all believe the same. Let Islam be different. Let our Muslim friends be different. Let's take the time to understand what they believe. Let's have that dialogue and that conversation. Don't be afraid of difference. I think in both Canadian culture and British culture right now. There's a little bit of a tendency to be afraid of difference. And I want to say to people, don't be afraid of difference. Be friendly, be engaging, be warm, be welcoming, but also recognize difference. And for those of us who are Christians, be willing to explain what it is we think is unique about Jesus. So that's what the book does, and I hope it's helpful. It's an ideal book if you've got a non-Christian friend, or you are watching this and you haven't got a Christian faith and you're interested in the question of religions. Hopefully it's helpful. And if you are a Christian and you want to talk to your Muslim friends or friends who think all religions are the same, also hope it's helpful. And if you know my kind of writing style, I also guarantee it's funny. There's at least one really good laugh out loud moment about every 3.2 pages. So that's about 60 really good belly laughs in the book as well. So it's funny, it's engaging, and it will help you think about probably one of the most important questions about God we can ask.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that plug. It's super good because I think it is an important question, one that I've heard many times asked before and have dialogued in. And just heard from someone the other day that they, getting their haircuts at the local barber, was even engaging in that kind of question as well.
Excellent.
And so I appreciate you writing a resource on that, because I think it's going to be very helpful for the individual as well as the church at large. And I just want to say, before we dive into a question, I so appreciate you jumping on and being able to answer these questions with us and giving me the chance to be able to grow you with some tough questions that young adults have been putting in. But I just appreciate the friendship that we've had over the past couple of years, and the times that we've had together when you've come out to west here to Edmonton. It's just been,
it's always been good, Stu. For some reason, I remember the very first time. It was a very dark and rainy night. I remember you picking me up at the airport on some hideously bad evening, and us then catching up and discovering, fellow Brits on the way to the church. So always are fond memories of our times together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's good. Okay, so let's dive into this question. If you're ready to go.
I'll do my very best.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and this question's been put into us through social media and a little form that we've had as well. But it says, can we trust the Bible to be true? Doesn't it have a bunch of errors and mistakes in it? So essentially, can we trust it even though it seems like it has these errors and mistakes?
Well, what a fantastic question. And of course, the challenge is with that question, Stu, is normally when somebody says to me, can we trust the Bible? It's got, mistakes or issues or errors or contradictions. The first thing I'd want to say to somebody is, well, can you give an example? Because it's a quite a broad sweeping statement. So for the person who's asked that question, I'd say a couple of things. If you're a Christian asking that because a friend has said that to you, first thing you can do is go back to your friend and just very politely, not aggressively, just say, okay, it's a very interesting perspective. Can you tell me what you had in mind? Because then you're dealing with something specific. And I think one of the hardest things when it comes to defending the Bible or what we believe as Christians, when you're just dealing in vague generalities, it's hard to know where to begin. And the reason I say that is actually, usually when someone's got an issue, a particular issue with the Bible where they've read something and struggled with it, or they think that two passages are, at loggerheads with each other, often what happens when you actually sit down and read the text. And the first thing I always say, well, whenever someone's got an issue with the Bible, make sure you read the text that you're looking at. Don't just read a verse. Don't just read a single thing out of context. Read the paragraph, read the passage, sometimes even read the book, because to go, then it gets you into the context of what you're dealing with. Then secondly, I think it's important to give the text the benefit of the doubt. Bear in mind, particularly if you're talking about the Old Testament, you can be dealing with a text from which we are 4,500 years removed, as well as removed through, culture and language and history. And sometimes it can simply be that we need to do a little bit of work to understand what the text is saying. And that shouldn't come as a surprise if you pick up any other sort of comparable work of literature from the same time period. Again, it's going to take a little bit of effort to figure out what's going on. And I think most of the Bible difficulties that I encountered as a young Christian, when I took the time to read the text, when I took the time to perhaps open a Bible commentary or read a good introduction to that book of the Bible, very often the difficulties kind of disappear when you actually sit down with a scholar, with a man or woman who's actually done the work and can help you through it. But then the other thing, finally, I'd say, Stu, and again, it's hard because we're dealing with a general question, so I appreciate I'm giving a general answer. I always think when it comes to the Bible, it's great to start with the specific and the easier to handle, and also the more important, by which I mean the Gospels. Because at the end of the day, for those of us who are Christians, for you and I and others watching this who have a Christian faith, we're not Christians because we happen to think that Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 2 in the Old Testament is the most amazing verse in the world. It may well be. It says some very helpful things. We're Christians because we believe Jesus is who he said he was. We believe he said the things he did the things that are claimed, he died and rose from the grave. And we get all that information largely from the Gospels and the New Testament. So when someone's a bit skeptical about the Bible, I would say start with the Gospels, because we're on such good historical ground there, because we're dealing with more recent history, something that's 2,000 years ago rather than 4,000 years ago, because we're dealing with a part of the Bible that in many cases we can corroborate from other ancient sources, other ancient writers, from things like archaeology and other evidences external to the text, as well as interesting internal evidence. To go on, the Gospels were on incredibly good ground. And there's in fact a wonderful, really helpful resource called Can We Trust the Gospels?, written by a friend of mine called Peter Williams. He's at Cambridge University. It's a thin little book. It's about 150 pages long, incredibly readable. And Peter will take you in that book through some of the kind of latest, really good historical evidence for why the Gospels are trustworthy, why historians think they contain eyewitness testimony. And of course, if you can trust the Gospels, and if you can trust that Jesus died and rose from the grave, well, Jesus trusted the Old Testament. And I think people who died and rose from the dead have incredibly high credibility. So I would say start with the Gospels, start with Jesus, and from there build out to, okay, then I'm willing to trust the rest of the Bible, not just based on the fact that it's some ancient book, but because it's based on the testimony and the credibility and the authority that Jesus gives to it. And if you've got particular issues, as I asked at the beginning, is there a particular issue? If you have got one, I'm sure, Stu, it's fair to say, if the person asking that comes back to you, Beulah, let Stu know the particular issue and he can help you with it, or pass it on to someone like myself or someone else who would be happy to answer a specific.
Yeah, for sure. I appreciate it is a general question and how you've answered that in general sense, but there were good details in how you've answered that. And I think back to one of the classes I took in Bible school and in hermeneutics, a very elementary, simple idea is when it seems like a passage may even have those contradictions, is that it's just different purpose in writing or writing styles. And so Matthew may see a story from this angle and John may see it from that angle. And Matthew's writing to these types of people and John's writing to these types of people. And so it's the same story. They're just telling it with different purpose and intentionality behind it. In that same way, it's like if my wife and I have an experience together and we gone on vacation or whatever it may be, or we're telling the story of our latest son being born, we're going to tell it from completely different experiences. My wife's going to tell it from like laying in the bed and what it was like for her. And I'm going to tell it from the angle of like, I came in with 30 seconds to go and I threw the bags down and all of a sudden, like, there's a baby here. And so it's the same story, doesn't take away from the accuracy. It's just told from different angles. And I like that you said, it's like, hey, give us an example. Because most of the times people hear these different ideologies or the Bible can't be trusted because they have these mistakes. But give me an example and let's dive into that. And let's actually find the facts and the truth behind it. And I think one of the simplest things is there's just different sides of the circle that people are writing from in that way. And that's why it just feels different, or it feels like it's contradiction, but it's actually not happening.
Yeah, I think that's very, very helpful. And a couple of things very briefly I would add, Stu, as well. That I think firstly is we say give the text the benefit of the doubt. And I say that about any text. I would say the same about the Quran or about, another ancient historical document. Rather than going, right, I'm convinced this is like dodgy and I'm going to look for anything where I can nitpick. That's just not fair. We wouldn't like to be treated like that. We want people to give us the benefit of the doubt. We'll give the text the benefit of the doubt, not least because I think it's pretty much, it's very sort of disrespectful, in fact, actually discriminatory, to assume that ancient people were stupid or out to manipulate. We wouldn't do that to someone from another culture. We would assume that's racism. Well, and that would be absolutely right if we were engaging in that. That would be deeply discriminatory. Well, don't discriminate chronologically. We can be chronologically discriminatory as well as we can be racially discriminatory. So I would say give text from another age, another time, give them benefit of the doubt, and do your best. Try and work at, okay, I've got this issue here. I'm gonna try and see if I can resolve it, rather than sort of wave it around and go, aha, if you're a skeptic, or go in the corner and cry if you're a Christian and go, I can't solve this problem. Well, put a bit of work in. Talk to people who've done a bit more work on it is the first thing. And then particularly to perhaps the more skeptical folks who may or may not be watching this. So one of the interesting things is, okay, if you're not going to trust the Bible because it's got issues, the question I want to turn around to you is say, well, what are you going to trust? What are you? Because all of us trust something. None of us are sitting out there going, well, I trust nothing. I just go through life without trusting nothing. Most people I meet who don't have a Christian faith, and perhaps would describe themselves as secular or believing nothing, of course, what they're trusting is themselves. And then I might just cheekily go, well, how reliable are you, mate? Because most of us, if we look inwardly, go, actually, we're pretty unreliable.
Yeah.
So if you're not willing to trust the Bible because you found a couple of nitpicks, are you really willing to trust yourself in its place and not give yourself the same scrutiny? And sometimes I think there can be a tendency for, look, if we suspect even remotely as people who are not Christians, if we suspect that maybe the Bible's got something going for it, there's something, this Jesus thing, for some people that can have quite scary implications because it might require a lifestyle change. And so the easiest thing to do is to keep God at a distance. Well, I'm not even going to read the Bible because it's got a couple of minor issues here. I'm not even going to think about Jesus because, well, you just can't be sure, can you? My question is, just make sure that you are not just throwing any old thing you can just to avoid taking the God question seriously, because it would be a shame if you miss the greatest news, I believe, in the universe, the greatest news in history, the person of Jesus, just because you were messing around with secondhand skepticism. If you have a genuine question, ask it. If there's a genuine Bible issue, bring it back in the social media feed. Talk to Stu or others, other Christians that ask that question by all means, but also be honest with yourself and don't hide behind a question because you don't want to deal directly with the God who knows you better than you know yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Like, it's not just you're defending the Bible in that way, but you're equipping guys that are listening to this conversation to be able to go, how do you turn that around and actually have an engaging conversation with someone where you don't have to feel threatened, oh, I need to put up my wall and defend this, but being able to go, okay, how can I turn around and ask you a question that helps you to be able to expand how you're thinking through this, and it isn't just kind of reactionary to like, oh, I read this blog or I saw this video on YouTube and it says the Bible's full of errors and you can't trust it. Like, it's a very pastoral, friendly way of engaging that conversation, and that's not just something that you're presenting here in this topic of conversation that we're having now. I've seen you do that before. I've seen you equip people in that, and I really appreciate how you've handled this question in this way, and I look forward to being able to grow you some more with some other questions I've got here lined up in that way. We'll finish off this one for now, and we'll jump into our next video. So thanks for joining us for this first one, Andy.
You're welcome, Stu. Always good to be with you.
Thank you for watching this conversation where we answered questions in our Ask Anything series. Make sure that you're following us on social media, and if you got a question, you can head on over to the link in our profile and be able to submit your question, and you never know, maybe we'll be answering yours next. See you next time.